This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for attending the Hull & Chandler Leadership Series. Hull & Chandler is a client-centered law firm providing legal services to individuals, families, businesses, and nonprofits in Charlotte, North Carolina, and throughout the Carolinas. Our award-winning attorneys help our clients resolve problems and find solutions. Our firm specializes in business and contract law, employment law, civil litigation, commercial real estate, estates, wills, trusts, personal injury, commercial real estate, and lending law. Sorry, you got two plugs there, TJ, and nonprofit and public charity law. If interested in learning more about how our attorneys can help you solve real-world problems, please visit our website and schedule a consultation with one of our award-winning attorneys. The law firm of Hull & Chandler is proud to sponsor the Leadership Series, a program where Hull & Chandler attorney Rocky Bagnott interviews local and regional leaders in the nonprofit, private, and public sectors to discuss the real-world interplay of law, business, and the social dynamics within the context of our continuously changing times. At our firm, his practices help nonprofits stay legally compliant, avoid legal problems, and resolve legal problems when they come up. Rocky provides legal services to the nonprofit sector through his fractional general counsel program, or by providing subscription legal services, so nonprofits can always have access to quality legal counsel when they need it, whether it's to review a contract or file a lawsuit on behalf of a nonprofit. Take it away, Rocky.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another Hull & Chandler Leadership Series. And and again, we're always very grateful for whoever can show up on a Wednesday in the middle of the week. But it is going to be a great show today. We have ourselves a very fantastic guest, and in many respects, a little bit of the flipping the script, so to speak. So Tony, who is our guest today, is Tony Martignetti. He is the host of the #1 podcast in America for nonprofits. Over 13,000 weekly subscribers and listeners for this podcast. So definitely, and that's how I came to know Tony, was listening to his podcast. So yes, I drive 45 minutes back and forth from work to Salisbury, and when I listen to podcasts, a variety of stripes, and one of them is nonprofit radio. So I'll put an unsolicited plug for nonprofit radio if you want to just subscribe to from iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or whatever your particular brand of podcast accessibility is. You should do so. But in addition to hosting the #1 podcast for nonprofits, Tony is also known as the evangelist for planned giving, and so through that he is the principal of Martignetti Planned Giving Advisors, which helps nonprofits build appropriate, scalable, and successful planned giving fundraising programs. So we may talk a little bit about the podcast, but definitely I think that the title and the marquee, and hopefully what you can get some good takeaways are it's about this topic of planned giving. And so before we get into the planned giving, though, I know that when you come to one of the leadership series, I always ask a question about what was your path to nonprofit leadership? And there's going to be no difference. So Tony, you got a very interesting backstory, something that you share in common with me about your path to the social sector, to nonprofit leadership, and to just being the voice that you are in the nonprofit sector. So take it away, Tony. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Rocky. Hey, everybody. Very nice to be with you. So are you asking me the question, what was my path?
Yeah, tell us. What's your origin story, Tony? How'd you get here?
Well, it began with hating the practice of law. Maybe that's.
I've been there.
I hope that's not what we have in common, Rocky. I hope you love the practice.
Well, I took a sabbatical from the practice of law for about 10 years. But I'm back with a vengeance now.
I mean, I loved law school. I'm very glad I went to law school. I still encourage folks to go to law school, but practicing law just didn't suit me. So I did it only for 2 years, and that was back in the mid '90s. And then I re-engineered myself as a planned giving fundraiser.
Well, how did that happen? If you're practicing law and now you're the evangelist guru of planned giving, there had to be some sort of, I don't know, triggering event or some sort of I don't know, what was that? What happened?
Well, I didn't become the evangelist right away.
Okay,
I've
yeah, good. You
just,
had to go to seminary, right?
no, there's no religious overtones to the
Yeah, I hear you. I
evangelism,
hear
to the plan giving evangelism. Everybody practices their own religion
Yeah.
that way. I'm
I hear you.
strictly
I
the
hear you.
fundraising plan giving
We're all
evangelist.
beliefs here on the leadership series.
Okay, exactly. Well, the triggering event, yeah, it was a bad situation at a small law firm in New York City. I just couldn't tolerate something I was asked to do, so I left. And you know, I've always liked college campuses. I like the vigor, the enthusiasm, just a bunch of young people learning. So I looked around back when the Chronicle of Philanthropy had print ads, or at least when the print ads were popular. This again, early mid 90s. This is mid 90s, and I saw planned giving, and I just did some research, and I saw that it has a legal component to it. It's much smaller than I thought at the time. Much smaller. I don't want to discourage anybody from planned giving, but there could be a legal side to it as you get further on. Your program gets, you're 10 years old, you could use some legal help. So I started applying for jobs in planned giving, and I got one at a college in Westchester County, outside New York City.
Okay, and that's where it just started.
That was my
So raising
re-engineering.
money.
I took courses, did a lot of learning, as lawyers do. You can learn something new, and it was a startup program, so we were starting with the basics, and that's what I do since, is helping nonprofits launch planned giving programs.
All right. So at your path here, you're now you become this evangelist for planned giving, but a lot of folks here might hear the term planned giving and go, okay, and just kind of nod their head. But for those who may not be necessarily super familiar with the term planned giving, give us a sort of a definition for everyday people of what planned giving is.
Yeah, this is raising money from people's estate plans and their retirement plans.
Okay.
And the simplest example is a gift in someone's will. There are lots of other planned gifts beyond that, but that's the by far the most common example. It's the most popular planned gift, and it's the easiest one to understand because everybody knows what a will is and how they work, and everybody knows they need a will. So a gift and a will, that's the simplest example of a planned gift. These are long-term gifts. Usually it's gifts of cash to the nonprofit at the donor's death.
Okay.
There are some exceptions, but usually that's the way it is. So it's long-term fundraising.
So when you and I talked, and we talked about, when we connected, you were telling me about, and maybe this is a topic of our show here, are debunking the top 5 myths of planned giving. So again, obviously planned giving, it's allowing someone to leave a gift to a nonprofit or a public charity in their will, or as a beneficiary in maybe a life insurance plan or something like that. But maybe, you said there were 5 myths. So, maybe we could do maybe a little like David Letterman here and just kind of go down the list. So what would you say to us? What's one myth of planned giving that a lot of folks are just walking around with in their head that you're ready to debunk right now?
That planned giving is only for your wealthy donors.
Okay.
Insidious myth. Very
All right.
bad. Very bad. It's folks of very modest means. Folks who give you small gifts, but they've been doing it for a long term. And it doesn't have to be every single year even, but they've been giving to you for a long time, and they make very small gifts. They are great prospects for a planned gift because they're planning for you. They're planning, and sometimes they're planning for you multiple times a year. You might have folks who give you many gifts in a year. They're small gifts. Those folks are great planned giving prospects. Planned giving is not only for wealthy donors, your major donors, not at all. Not at all.
So your message to, say, for instance, I'm a resource development officer, fundraising officer at a charity, and they always say, like, build relationship with donors. But usually when you're thinking of donors, it's definitely, there's a hierarchy, right? There's the donor that, donates numbers in the 4 and 5 digits, and then there's donors who donate things in more the 2 and 3 digits, right? And so it sounds like what you're saying, because it sounds like a novel concept, is that, well, is that I think that many fundraising professionals, others, or particularly if you have a small office, you're just going to try to go for the whale, right? You're going to go for the larger donor. But you're saying that plan giving isn't just for, you could just have modest means, and if you've got a retirement account, or if you've got just a simple will, you could leave that to a charity. So for those who are seeking to build these relationships, you could look small too. In fact, if you had 10 small bequeaths versus one large one, there could be about the same amount, right?
Could very well be. Yeah.
Assuming they all die at the same time, right? That's more.
Yeah. The average charitable bequest in the U.S. is about $35,000.
Really? Okay.
I've seen many gifts higher than that. Of course, it's an average. So I've seen many gifts much lower than that too. But you just don't want to. Yeah. When you're looking for your plan giving prospects, you don't want to exclude those folks who make small gifts to you.
Do you see that happen a lot? Like when you're working with a charity, that they tend to just focus on like who they've targeted as a large contributor, and they may forget and not go after and not capture folks in the sort of the more moderate income means? Is that something that you see a lot?
Well, not when they're working with me. No, they won't. They won't make that mistake when they're working with me, because I will have debunked this nasty myth. But yeah, that's why it's one of the top 5 myths that I've decreed in my 25 years. I've been doing plan giving since 1997. So these are the misconceptions that I see a lot of folks have, that they only pursue major donors for planned gifts, and that's a mistake.
Yeah, because I mean, not to sound,
exclude, of course, you don't exclude your major donors.
Yeah, absolutely not.
You don't stop at that. You don't stop at that level of giving.
Okay, no, I think that's a great thing to demystify. All right, so we've decided that obviously it's not just wealthy donors that charity should look at. You should look at everybody, because everybody is even eligible to have a simple will done, right? So you don't have to have a lot of different, all the bells and whistles that folks have, with moving their money around before they pass on. But speaking of like that, I do see one of your other myths. Maybe you can go into that one. Is talking about lots of different options and stuff. Talk about another myth you want to debunk.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the one that you have to offer a lot of gift options.
Yeah, like there's you go on the website and there's 20 different things and a lot of different. Go ahead. Why not? Why shouldn't I have 20 different gift options? Isn't giving people more choices a better thing to do?
Not when you're getting started. Not when you don't have you don't have expertise, and you don't need it. You don't need expertise to have a very respectable, successful planned giving program. The reason is that these gifts by will that we're talking about, these are the place to start your program. And that's because gifts by will are at least 75%, or maybe in lots of programs, up to 90% of all the planned gifts you're ever going to get anyway. Even offering other methods of planned giving, like charitable gift annuities, or opening it up to gifts of life insurance, or the different varieties of charitable trusts. You don't have to go into any of those, because at least 75% of the gifts are going to be gifts by will anyway. These very simple gifts. This is the place to start your plan giving program, because you don't need expertise. You're not talking to folks about the details of their will. You're talking to them about the value of a long-term gift to your work. How important is it that the work for the disabled community in Charlotte continue 20, 25, 30 years from now, Sarah? And what does the community look like if your work ceases 25 years from now? What would the detriment be to the community? Well, the planned gift that you're talking to someone about is intended to prevent that ugly future from ever happening. So
Wow.
the conversation is about the long-term sustainability, how critical it is that your work continue for decades and generations to come. That's what your conversation is about. That's why you keep the method of plan giving simple. You start with wills, simple gifts by will, and you never, ever have to go any further. You could, but you don't ever have to. You can have a very successful, respectable planned giving program, just only ever talking to folks about gifts in their will.
Well, stay on the topic of the conversation, right? Because, you know, like in another life, I was an executive director, and I was always, you know, making asks and such. But one ask I didn't know a lot about plan giving, to be honest, at the time, and such as, you know, so I felt comfortable, you know, talking about what you can do currently, right? Like you could write a check, or you could attend our fundraiser, or you could do, you know, give us a monthly donation on our website. But kind of broaching into that topic of one's mortality, right? You know, how, I mean, I know this is not necessarily a myth or anything, but what would you say, what are some things that you how do you start that conversation, right? Like you got a will, you're gonna die. I mean, how do you
Oh, Rocky, no, don't open that way. By the way, Rocky, I gotta ask you, I always thought you pronounced your name Cabagno.
It's
But
all
you
right.
pronounce it Cabagnat? Oh,
Yeah, Cabagnat. Yeah. Well, you know what?
Cabagnat.
When you have a foreign last name, it's like horseshoes, right? You know, close is good enough, right? You're gonna get points.
All right. Well, I'm not doing Martignetti. I do Martignetti, but I'm not the 100% participation. The 100% pronunciation would be Martignetti. So I'm not.
If I had to get 100% pronunciation correct, I'd still be in Salisbury right now trying to correct people. So I got to get to work, right?
Okay. No, the conversation, the way to open the conversation is by talking to the person who's been giving for so long and saying, look, you've been supporting us so long. You understand how important our work is. You know that Charlotte Mecklenburg Library is critical in the community. And don't you want to see it surviving for decades and generations to come? Would you be interested in making a long-term gift, including us in your will? Because this really is, it's a natural extension of the giving that you've been doing for years. I'll bet there are, you know, folks who've been giving decades. Those are the people you want to be talking to. You're certainly not going to acquire new donors through your planned giving program. That is not a donor acquisition program. That's a mistake. You're talking to folks who already love your work. And how do you know they love it? Because of their long committed giving history. So it's a natural extension. And you typically are talking to folks who are about 55 to 60 and over. You know, that's when people thinking about or are starting to think about their long-term plan as a way to give back to the causes that have been important to them, to the causes that they love. So I'm not saying it's the first time people start thinking about their long-term plan. You should have a will long before 55 or 60, decades before. But it's the point where folks start thinking about giving back through their will. And so these are your best prospects, and it's easy to open a conversation. Look, you've been with us for so long. We've kicked off some of the nonprofits I work with, and or some of the nonprofits that join my planned giving accelerator, where I teach this online. They'll launch a wills campaign. There's their hook for opening a conversation. We kicked off a wills campaign. It's very simple. We're just encouraging gifts by will. And you've been one of our longest term survivors, longest term supporters. Would you consider including us? We're reaching out to lots of folks. Is it something you would consider?
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm gonna give a shout out to someone I see in our chat here is TJ Kahn, and he is he's our new attorney here, and he does estates practice. And I hope you're on the call here, TJ. I'm going to ask you a question, but because I want to show what he knows a little bit here. So I have a will. I'm listening to you, Tony, and I'm like, I got to keep supporting, but I forgot to put them in my will originally. And so I'm going to ask the question is like, if I change my mind, TJ, and I want to add, the library and Sarah's charity to my will. If I've already made it, it's already been signed and witnessed. So what do I do? You're unmuted, TJ. Hop in.
Yeah, sorry, I had to jump on my laptop here. I wasn't expecting a speaking engagement part of this time, so I'm a little bit excited.
I know.
So ask your question one more time about
one
your
of our
will.
new team members, TJ, here to Holland Chandler, and so he does our estates practice and a lot of other commercial real estate and stuff. But yeah, so I want to change my will. What do I do, man?
Yeah, so there's really two ways to do that. Way number one is you can do a codicil, which I never really recommend because, it's an attachment to the will. You normally change a provision, an article in the will. I normally recommend to my clients to go ahead and just execute a new will. That way, what if the codicil gets lost? The former will looks like it's a standalone instrument or standalone document, and that could get probated by itself without the codicil. If you execute a new will, if they find, there's no other document to find, there's just that document. You don't have to worry about any other document getting lost or anything like that. So that's normally what I recommend to my clients is to execute a whole new will.
And
Right.
Rocky, can I point something out?
Yeah,
What you
absolutely.
just did by asking TJ a question, that's exactly what you went to the expert for the question. That's exactly what nonprofits do. That's what when their potential donors they're talking to about a gift in their will, when the donor has a question, well, how is it best for me to include the organization in my will? I'm willing to do it. How should I best do it? You don't need to answer that question. You refer them back to their attorney. You're having a conversation about the sustainability, the long-term survivability of your nonprofit, how important that survivability is to your community. You're an expert in your nonprofit's work and how important it is that that work continue for decades to come. So when a technical question like that arises, you refer them to their attorney. That's a question you'd have to go ask your attorney. So you don't, that's the point. And Rocky, you just gave a great example of it. You defer to the expert. You don't need to know about how to draft wills, understand the difference between a codicil and a will and why one was preferred over the other. You refer them to their expert, to their attorney. You're not getting into a technical conversation. And that's another reason why wills are the place to start your plan giving program. You don't need to learn about life insurance as a charitable gift, charitable remainder trusts versus charitable lead trusts versus charitable gift annuities. You don't need to know that. Simple wills. Everybody knows what a will is. Everybody knows how wills work. And everybody knows they need one.
It sounds like if we're like a sports team, you're really preaching kind of like a simplified, but very specific offense, right? Where a lot of people show up with their clipboard, they got 87 different plays. It sounds like you're like the old Nebraska team. It's just like, let's just pound the football down the middle and just win this game, right? And we could, but there's a lot of, I think I would imagine you got to be pretty effective with this because obviously you're on the pod, you got your podcast, you're talking about it. But I think a lot of people suffer from that sort of, if it's overly complicated, then it must be comprehensive, and it sounds like what you're preaching here is just pick a couple of avenues, but do them right. It sounds like
I want to drill down even further. Pick one avenue.
Oh, okay.
Gifts by will, charitable bequests alongside your donor's husband, wife, children, grandchildren. There's a gift for your nonprofit. It's simple to do for the reasons I just explained. You don't need expertise about a panoply of planned gifts. Yes, there are other things you can do in the out years, and I've done them. I've done fancy charitable remainder unit trust with net makeup provisions. You don't need to know that. It's not necessary to start your planned giving program. You start with simple gifts by will. And then if you want to build in the future, then you can offer other options. Absolutely. If you never want to, you never have to. Simple gifts by will. Keeps it simple for you, simple for your donor. That's the way to launch your planned giving program.
So what would you say is another myth? I think sounds like, and I think we probably have touched on it. I think you've said the word expertise, so maybe you can tell the folks what's another major myth that nonprofits have about their planned giving programs.
Yeah, exactly right, Rocky. You're referring to the one that says that you need technical expertise. You don't. For all the reasons I just described, to launch your planned giving program, you don't need technical expertise. You're talking to folks about the sustainability of your work and how important that is in your community. Anything technical, you refer them to their attorney.
Yeah, I mean, I think because you think about and it's interesting because like your podcast, the slogan is what is it again? It's like for the rest of the 95%.
Big nonprofit ideas for the other 95%.
Right, and I think because I'll go from my own experience when I was running, a mid-sized nonprofit. It was a community action agency, so we did have a lot of federal money. So we're definitely, like a $15 million, program, but we never even thought of a plan giving program. And when I did look through some kind of website about it, you're right. I suffered from what they call paralysis by analysis, because again, there were all those things. I started having nightmares of estates and trust class when you said charitable lead trust and all of those sort of very interesting things that I obviously must have got a D or a C on my exam in trying to write what's the issue. I don't know. I don't even know what that is, right? And so I think that what you're preaching here is that you just KISS, keep it simple, stupid, and keep your eyes on the prize and focus on going after wills, getting, because you said 75% of all planned giving gifts are really ultimately wind down into wills. If we had to sift it out, that's what 75% of these things are going to just come from straight up, just regular old, just bread and butter wills. And so, like you said, I think for those of you in the charity sector, are thinking about this, what Tony's saying is that don't do what I did and just sort of have that paralysis by now and just get intimidated by all these different types of, of sort of, I don't call them gimmicks, but these different types of plays. Keep a very simple play and look at a will. But you mentioned another thing about things like a life insurance plan or something like that. Can you talk a little bit about how folks could utilize those to benefit the charity?
Okay, but these are not the place to start. If you decide to go further in planned giving, in out years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years later, with the caveat that you never have to. You don't have to ever go beyond simple gifts by will, and your nonprofit can have a very successful, respectable planned giving program. You don't ever have to go beyond. But
wow, okay, so yeah,
if you want to, sure. Well, we can talk about life insurance.
No, that's good, because it sounds like I'm actually sort of in my mind thinking, okay, well, you got this and you got that, but you're saying it's something incredibly just intuitive and simple. Just stick with the wills. If you got
wills, you don't. I've said it. I've said it all different ways. You could go further in planned giving, but to get started, you don't need to. You don't need to, and in the out years, you still don't have to. It's just not essential to go beyond gifts by will. You can, you don't need to.
Okay, so I think we got 3 myths down. What's a 4th myth that people are walking around thinking about planned giving?
It's kind of related to what we're talking about, that this requires a lot of money. You have to invest a lot of money in fancy web pages that have calculators for tax deductions and marginal tax rates and what's my rate of income going to be. And you don't need web pages like that, you don't need to spend a lot of money to launch a planned giving program. You can launch it digitally, so you're saving on postage costs, and you
Mhm.
just start talking to your top prospects about including your work in their will. So it does not take a lot of money to launch a planned giving program. You don't need technical expertise or to pay for that expertise.
Mhm.
You don't need extensive web pages. One simple page with some explanation about how important your work is. Maybe you have a pull quote from a donor, something like that. There's a simple planned giving page, because you're keeping it simple,
Mhm.
at least at your launch, and maybe indefinitely. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to get going with planned giving.
Rocky, I wanted to
So-
jump in and
yeah.
let you know
Mhm.
that I believe Christina's left, but there was a question in the chat. I know this is recorded, so maybe it'll be beneficial if Tony could answer that question.
Okay.
And then she could go back and watch the recording and get her answer.
Okay, Tony, here's a question. Christina has, in her sort of planned giving, has left us with a question when she actually left the.
Yeah.
left
Oh,
the
I'm
chat
sorry.
here.
I'm sorry she didn't ask her question while she was here.
What-
All right.
Yeah. So she says here, Tony, you said you don't need to be rich to commit to long-term giving. Who takes on the expense of changing the will? Is there a protocol?
It's going to be the donor. Yeah,
Mhm.
they're going to have to pay their attorney for doing it either by codicil or by will, and most people just revise their will. Look, they may not do it necessarily right away just because you've asked.
Mhm.
One of the responses you might get is, next time I revise my will, I'll include you. And when might they revise their will? Well, there might be a marriage or a birth. There
Mhm.
might be a death or a divorce. A lot of people recommend revisiting wills every several years, even if there isn't a major life event like that. Certainly, if they happen to move to a different state, then it's smart to have their will looked at by an attorney in that new state. But typically, it's driven by family events, or it's just every several years, someone is very smartly looking at their will, and they may have a more comprehensive estate plan around their will. But so they may not necessarily do it right away just because you've asked. Some folks will. I've certainly seen that. Some will say, I'm going to do it, and I'll get with my attorney, and then they let me know that they have done it. But it might be a longer term process for them
I
when
see.
they're going back to, as I said, revisit their will for some other reason. That's when they decide to include you.
So don't go checking their name off the box of donors as soon as you just talk to them and you do have that conversation and they say, yeah, I'll go change my will. Is that it does take time, and so don't just think that's money in the bank just because they said they were going to change it.
Right. You want to keep that relationship open. Because can I follow up with you? Depending on what they say, if they say I'm going to get with my attorney, could I follow up with you in another 6 or 8 weeks? Is that enough time? I just, to confirm that you've included us, or it might be 6 months or a year. It's going to be a long time. All right. We'll keep in touch. We'd be happy to keep in touch with you in the meantime. And I hope you will let us know when you have included us.
Absolutely.
I wanted to add something in, just briefly on follow-up. What I do with my clients is I allow them to follow up with me for free, a year or two after. That way we can sit down and discuss, charitable giving, births, deaths, change in life events, anything like that. So if they want to make the change, they don't feel like they're obligated to pay for the time. We can at least discuss it, figure out what it would look like and how to implement it in the plan they already have. Then we can go from there.
That's great. That's fabulous, TJ. That's a good way of encouraging folks to come back. Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're not. It's like, thank you. And so we have one more myth to debunk. So should I say it, or should you just go ahead and say it?
Go ahead, Rocky. You introduced this.
All right. And I think so. One thing that maybe your giving officers or maybe a board member might chime in and just say this, but say that if we dedicate ourselves to planned giving, because obviously that's money probably farther into the future, and we may have immediate needs now, is that the planned giving will hurt our other fundraising. So push back on that myth.
Yes, another insidious myth. I've seen it in my own practice for now 25 years in planned giving. Lots of folks increase their giving. Quite the contrary to what a lot of people think, is that it'll hurt other fundraising. The reason is folks feel so much closer to your nonprofit when they've put you alongside their husband, wife, children, grandchildren, and maybe even dear friends. Sometimes dear friends make it into the will. When they've put you alongside all those people who are close to them in their lives, they feel so much closer to you, to your work, and many people will increase their other giving, whether it's annual or major giving. Now, am I saying everybody increases? No, of course not. Lots of people stay the same, some do decrease, but I've seen mostly people either increase or stay the same. Now you might say, okay, well, Tony Martinetti's got 25 years worth of anecdotes, but it's still anecdotal. Doesn't really move me. Okay, you don't have to rely on my experience. It's been studied quantitatively by Professor Russell James at Texas Tech University. He's done research across I think thousands of estates and maybe thousands of nonprofits, and he found it's something like a 71% likelihood that after someone has included the nonprofit in their will, that they will increase their giving. So you got my 25 years, and you got Professor Russell James at Texas Tech University, who's been on my podcast, not recently. I should have him back, but he's studied it, and there is a great likelihood that folks will increase their giving. And I think it's their other giving. And I think it's for the reason that I described, that they just feel such a kinship now with your work.
Why do you think that maybe, do you think it's a matter of I don't want to say ignorance, like they're like ignorant, but like sort of like not knowing of this as an avenue, or just sort of a resistance because of what do you think are the biggest factors that within a charity or public charity that kind of push back against, I guess, either starting and or expanding a planned giving program?
Oh, it's all these myths that we're talking about, Rocky. It's folks thinking that it's only for wealthy donors. So, we don't have too many wealthy donors, so it's not for us.
Okay, yeah.
We have to do lots of options. I don't understand charitable remainder trusts, and I don't have the expertise in-house to master it. So we're not gonna do any planned giving. I don't understand life insurance as a charitable gift, and I don't have the time to figure it out, and I don't have the expertise. So we're just not going to do any planned giving. We feel like we have to spend a lot of money, and plus our board says it's going to hurt our other fundraising. So all these reasons, we're not going to do planned giving. That's why we're here to debunk these nasty myths. They're just not so. It doesn't hurt your other fundraising. You don't need expertise. You don't need a lot of money. You don't have to do lots of options, and it's not only for your wealthy donors.
Well, I'll say this, definitely, I've kind of, I haven't really done a whole lot of thinking, but now you've given me a lot of different ideas, about, just utilizing the last will and testament as a fundraising tool or a resource development tool for charity. I think, who are some of the biggest fundraisers for charity? I mean, I know we're talking about charities that may have, like a dedicated resource officer, or maybe even a whole staff dedicated to quote unquote charitable solicitation or whatever is out there. But I'm thinking of like board members, right? I mean, these are folks who come, they volunteer, and it seems like, maybe putting the idea into their heads that they should, consider, bequeathing even just a little bit to the charity that they had served for so long as a board member. Even have you ever what is your luck with like getting board members to leave a little bit of something at the end of their life?
Yeah, very high. Great luck. That's the place to start. Your board members may very well be all or among your top prospects. I like to see 100% board participation in wills, and for that I would say even younger than what I'd said earlier, 55 to 60. I think a board member of any age should have the organization in their will. Now, look, if they leave the board and then they take the organization out, that's their own choice. But when they're on the board, I think every board member, that's the goal anyway. That's the goal. Have 100% participation in wills. And Rocky, you mentioned, big charities. I don't know, folks probably don't know. I'm in North Carolina. I'm in Emerald Isle. I live on the beach. Well, it's a short flight and about I guess a 5.5 hour drive to Charlotte from where I am. But all my flights go through Charlotte. You can't get anywhere either from New Bern or Jacksonville without going through Charlotte. So you name the biggest charities, biggest ones in the state. What I guess would be higher ed, right? Duke, UNC, the major nonprofit hospital medical systems. Those would be the biggest ones. I assure you, the vast majority of their planned gifts are gifts by will. And that's why this is the place to start. And, because even if you do go beyond, the vast majority of your gifts are going to be gifts by will anyway. So that's why I say it's the place to start. It's the low-hanging fruit. And you don't ever have to go beyond. You certainly could, but you don't need to.
Yeah, that's it's sometimes very simple approach to to fundraising is usually the best. So I tell you what, guys, we've kind of turned it into a little bit more of an open forum. I know we've got a couple people here, but if you got questions now, or you want to just kind of jump in and ask, you've got the evangelist for Planned Giving here on the leadership series today. So, and TJ, feel free to hop in if you got some ideas or something. Let's just have a free flowing seminar type discussion right now here on the leadership series.
Anybody?
Oh, that's a good one.
Questions? Yeah. What's on your mind? How does it sound? How does it feel? Does it feel like something you could do?
So here's a question. Here's a question that's come up before with some of my personal clients. Is some of them, want to give to a charity but remain anonymous. So, when a will's probated, it's public record. So, what do you suggest as far as clients coming to their estate planning attorney wanting to give, but wanting to do it, in a humble way where they stay, remain anonymous as far as the gift goes? What do you recommend for that?
Well, first thing I would say, TJ, thank you. First thing I would say is you can let the charity know that you want to be anonymous. And I understand probated wills public. We're going to get to that. I'll get that in a sec. But you can tell the charity that you've included them in your will, but you want to be an anonymous donor. You don't want them to use your name when they list the members of the Planned Giving Recognition Society. You don't want to be included in that. Just list me as an anonymous donor. In terms of a will becoming public when it's probated, so when the person has died, I'm not sure it's too commonly understood that gifts that wills become public upon the death of the person. The will gets submitted to a court. It's called a probate court or a surrogate's court, and that will is then a public document, which means anybody could see it. You don't have to be named in the will. Anybody who wants to make application and maybe pay a copying fee or something like that, or maybe pay the postage for that county to send you the will, anybody can see it. I don't think most folks are doing that. I haven't heard of that as an objection to including a charity in their will, because I don't think too many folks are pursuing, looking at other people's wills once the person has died. So it's interesting, TJ, that you've heard that. Maybe just letting them know that the charity could keep them anonymous. Maybe that's some comfort to them.
Yeah, that it's a good point. I don't get it too often, but some of my clients do like to do things, behind the curtain. They don't want to, they just want it to be genuine, and, maybe they don't want their name on it. They want to give, but they don't want to tell the world that they've given.
Yeah.
It's not as often that you see that. Some of the the more humble clients, especially I've noticed with the larger gifts, it's sometimes important to them. There are ways, from a planning standpoint that we could accomplish that. But I was just curious on if you ran across that.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard that much of as an objection. Of course, you're doing estate planning, so they could use some other vehicle, one of the a living trust, that those don't become public, as you well know. I'm letting other folks know that there are methods. But again, the folks in the nonprofit, the folks in nonprofits that are with us, you don't have to know what becomes public, what doesn't. Those are the kinds of questions that you refer folks back to their attorneys about, right? You're talking about what you've heard me say probably 5 times already. The survivability, sustainability of your work, and how important that is to your community. That's what your conversations revolve around. Any technical questions, you refer them to their attorney.
All right.
Linda, Shannon, Sarah, you have questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
So at my nonprofit, I know that there's several planned gifts that have been given, but I'm also fairly new here, and there's no documentation. I just know we have a relationship with so-and-so, and they've said that lifespan is in their will. So my question is really more from like a planning perspective, or a communicating what a planned giving is to our board, for example, and how we would, I'll try to explain it a little bit better. I'm trying to come up with a way to keep track, either in our donor database, of who's given a planned gift. Is there a best practice way that you have to do that? And do you usually require some documentation from the donor, or just word from them?
Yeah, the best way to track the people who have made a planned gift commitment is through a planned giving recognition society. So you create one. I like to see unique, iconic names to the organization, not so much, the Heritage Circle, Legacy Fund, Heritage Fund, Legacy Circle. Those are ubiquitous names. They could fit anywhere. Something iconic to the organization. Maybe it's a founder's name, something that every organization has. Could be the year you were founded. Could be the 1978 Society, right? Year of founding. That's an easy one. But so you create a planned giving recognition society, and then in your CRM database, of course, you're tagging members either with a tag or an attribute, however you preserve that they are members of the recognition society. In terms of documentation, that's an institutional choice. I've worked with lots of organizations. They just take the person's word, and I think that's fine.
Okay.
Somebody checks a box on a reply card that says, I've included you in my will. Welcome to the Recognition Society. That's all we need to know. Takes you aside in an event, or tells you in a phone conversation that they've included you. They want you to know, welcome. Effusive thanks. We don't need documentation. I don't think it's necessary, and any documentation would be non-binding on the estate anyway. It would not be legally enforceable. Unless it was done in the form of a contract, which is very rare. I've done them, but quite rare. We don't even get into it. So any documentation would be non-binding anyway. But on the flip side, there are organizations that like to have something in writing. They like to preserve something digital in the person's record, beyond the checked off box. You could do that. It's merely an expression of the person's interest at this time. And you can give the option to specify what the value of the gift is. If they know, they may not know, because it might just be a percentage of the well, it's called the remainder of their estate, but it might just be a percentage of their estate. So they may not know the dollar value, or if it's an exact amount, it's called an outright bequest of a dollar specific amount, they may not want to tell you. That's fine.
Yeah.
So, most of the form is optional anyway. But
yeah, I think that's probably one of when I'm putting together the plan for, we do not have an existing planned giving society. But most of our work is concrete, like, hey, Bank of America, give us this, is going to give us $20,000 and here's how we plan to use it. And we know the timeline and we know that they've definitely agreed to do it. And planned giving to me feels like it lives in this abstract place where you're not really sure the amount and you're not really sure when it's coming, but you're building this pipeline of potential gifts that could come. And then once they come, you figure out how to utilize, those funds to benefit your organization.
And something we haven't talked about yet, Sarah, a way of using those funds could be to build your endowment.
Mhm.
A lot of planned gifts, again, not all, but a lot of planned gifts are unrestricted dollars. And I'm routinely encouraging nonprofits that I work with to put as much of that unrestricted money as possible into endowment. And I understand the tensions, the lights have to be paid, salaries got to be covered,
Mhm.
rent, programs, of course, but as much as possible, get that money into an endowment and your successor will thank you.
Okay,
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you.
Good. Okay, cool.
I wanted to build off Sarah's question. And so, for instance, if a client were to come to me and wanted to leave a planned gift, but wanted to use it for a certain purpose in accordance with the nonprofit. So that goes back to Sarah. I think what she may have been, kindling in her mind was, what are we going to do with the money? Or how do we prepare, to receive it? So if the client wants to do something in particular with the gift or have something coordinated with the nonprofit, what's the best way to set that up? Because obviously, and hopefully for the client, it's going to be way in the future when something like that were to happen. So how do we communicate with the nonprofit or, set something up to make sure the gift's used the way the donor wants it used?
Yeah, TJ, thanks. I would encourage your clients with those concerns to talk to the nonprofit. And now they may say, well, we don't want the nonprofit to know about our gift. Well, you can't have it both ways. The best way to make sure that a purpose that they're going to designate in their, I'm going to stick with the simple example of a will, that it's going to be used the way they want it to be used is to talk to the charity. Is this a program that is short-lived, or is it part of the core mission that's very unlikely to ever change? So the best way to ensure that their gift would get used the way they want it used is for them to have, I'll finish my sentence. Sorry. For them to have a conversation with the charity. Now they could ask you to do it. If they really don't want to reveal themselves to the nonprofit, they could ask you to have a conversation. And then, you're just reaching out to the development, the fundraising team and saying that you've got a client. They'd like to remain anonymous. They want to include you in their long-term plan. And here's what their intention is that, and how should we word it? And is it something that we can count on a program, of this type surviving them, lasting into perpetuity? And then, of course, you would draft language that said, if the program should cease to exist, then at the discretion of the board of trustees, the money will be put to the most closely aligned use as described in this paragraph. So I'm sure you would include language like that, just in case the program did cease for some reason. But
yeah, I think that's a good
the best
point.
method is open communication, either the donor to the charity or you to the charity.
And it's important to make sure too that you put the language in the legal instrument that the nonprofit wants that would allow the gift to accomplish what the donor wants it accomplished. So, you can work with a nonprofit's attorney if there's an in-house counsel. And I do have a little bit of experience doing that in the past. And that way I made sure the language that was added would be the most useful for both parties to accomplish the gift.
Right. But even a nonprofit that doesn't have legal counsel, it could be a small organization, a staff of 8 or 10, 12, they may not have general counsel. They may not be availing themselves of Rocky Cabagnot's, Rocky Cabagno's services. So, but the fundraisers will work with you and they'll be respectful. They're not going to ask who's the person. We have to know. that's just not going to happen. You know, so if it was you having the conversation with them, they would help you as much as they can. And then you being the attorney, of course, you know, you would take the final step, which is, you know, goes back to what I said earlier. Your technical questions, you're referring your donor back to their attorney.
Right. Thanks.
All right, we're getting close to the end of the hour. Any other questions? We've
Anybody
got
else?
the evangelist here for Planned Giving, the host of the Nonprofit Radio podcast right here, virtually in Charlotte, North Carolina today.
I'm only a few hours away. I'm on the coast.
Absolutely.
Come see us in Emerald Isle. It's a beautiful little town.
All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any other questions, but I'm gonna give you I'm gonna give two plugs here, two solicitations here, because I'm allowed to do this. One, go ahead and subscribe to Tony Martignetti's Nonprofit Radio podcast. I mean, it is great. You know, there's, like you said, there's tons of different types of speakers, everything from board relations, fundraising, volunteer management, finance, prospect research, legal stuff. That's how I actually kind of went there. He had a legal expert from California on there who's very smart, and I learned a lot. Accounting, investments, donor relations, marketing, tech. We talked about tech, social media, public relations, all of that in the nonprofit sector. It's a different topic just about every week. Just, you know, when on your drive to work or from work, it's a good little listen there just to kind of open up. And of course, if you are in running a public charity, or you're on the board of a public charity and you're looking to bring on an expert, well, no, let's not use the word expert. You're going to bring on a coach, bring on a trainer, somebody who's going to motivate your team to get out there and to raise more money from Planned Giving to help you build an endowment, to help you, you know, pay for, you know, just immediate things. Tony is that coach. He is that person. So he's not just hosting a podcast. He's also providing, you know, valuable consulting services to the public sector, and he lives here in North Carolina now. So spread that out to those of you in all the various area codes from 919 to 704-980-336. You know, just put it out there as well. So Tony, how would somebody reach you if they wanted to? Obviously, you can go on the podcast stuff, but if they want to get you, they want to bring you in house to coach them, to get them to that, get them that championship. How can they bring in Tony Martignetti?
TonyMartignetti.com. There's
That's
a contact page. There's a contact page there, or just email me, Tony@TonyMartignetti.com. And thank you very much, Rocky. That was very gracious of you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Like I said, when we connected, I was like, well, you know what? I still need to build up some stuff before I can get on the Tony Martignetti podcast. But you know what? I can bring the Tony Martignetti to the Rocky webcast, and we'll, you know, and we'll build from there, right? So again, thank you for coming on. I hope this is not your last time on the leadership series, and hope to see you in Charlotte for sure. And yeah, everybody, until next time, we're signing off with the leadership series. Thank you, everybody, for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky.
Yeah. Thanks,
And
DJ.
Tony.